Thank you so much, Iggy, and thank you everybody. It's really exciting to get to speak to this South African audience. So yes, my name is Jason Giles, and I'm currently the VP for Customer Insight, Experience Strategy at User Testing. If you're not familiar with user testing, we're a platform that helps you get feedback from people to understand whether your ideas are good, whether your products are usable. And yeah, and a big part of my job is actually attending events like this and talking to teams that and designers, researchers, UX people about um, all the changes that are going on. If you haven't noticed, the world's pretty topsy-turvy and there's a bunch of new capabilities. So I'm hoping to spend my time. I've got a main talk that's around AI impacts on design. But before I begin, I actually thought that I would spend a little bit of time talking about my journey because, as Iggy mentioned, these are some of the products I've worked on. You know, Xbox One was my baby. Doing Working with the NFL at DirecTV and building television applications, and even at Ticketmaster, you know, that problem of how do we get tickets to real fans of music and concerts and sports. Um, but I didn't start there. And so I'm going to share a little bit of my journey because I think that there's some things that have gone on in the past that are really relevant for today. So Iggy touched on this. You know, I got my beginning actually as an electronic musician. You know, this was back in the late 90s. The rave scene was going on. And as we were, you know, doing our music, this thing called the internet came. And it was amazing. We're like, hey, you know, we could build web pages for the band and we could do all this stuff. And so, you know, it was like, I was, it's kind of the Wild West. You know, you'd go to these web pages, you'd view source, you learn how to do it, you'd get a pirated version of Photoshop and start hacking away at things. And I think it was this amazing time where there was new technology being introduced. And really, the lesson that I learned there was that it was a time for curiosity. You know, Iggy mentioned this. Like, there's new capabilities that are being introduced, and this is the time to really let curiosity lead because the purpose may come after the fact. And that was what happened with me because here I was, I had built up this portfolio of CD covers and web pages for other bands. And I had a friend who worked at Microsoft. And at the time, Microsoft was hiring anybody who knew anything about the internet. And so, based on some of these introductions, I fibbed my way a little bit. But I got my foot in the door, and this was really the beginning of an entirely new career. No, I was not going to be a great music rock star. I had to come to terms with that, but it opened up this new opportunity for me. And the reality was is that when I started Microsoft, I knew I was a fraud. I knew I didn't have, you know, the design degrees or the college certificates. And so I expected to be found out every day. And so what I did was I realized if I'm going to be fired tomorrow, I need to learn whatever I can right now. And I think that's kind of the lesson that I learned to which still applies for today is like act like you're on borrowed time. Use the time to be learning as much as you can because you know right now uh, the AI credits they're cheap. They're not always going to be like that, right? The access to technology that we have right now, we never know when that's going to be taken away. So now is the time to really lean in and use that to be learning. Now, I said I got my first job at Microsoft, but what was interesting was that this job was actually in the Microsoft library. It was a physical library with books. And every day, Bill Gates would come in and he would get the latest magazine and he would talk to the front desk. And I got in this job and I was being asked to work on um, what was at the time the world's largest intranet. So this is all the information that was being organized and for the Microsoft employees. But on each side of me, I've got librarians who have these degrees in something called information science. And I had no idea what this was. Like I thought, like, well, librarians, they work at libraries, like they go find your books. Like I didn't realize it was really kind of confusing to me. But what I didn't realize at the time was that these people had skills like how to organize information, how to retrieve information, how to go and bring multiple pieces of information together so that it makes meaning. And what do we call those people today? Well, they're information architects. And so the learning that I got was that these people that had these unique skills, they didn't even have a role for it yet. You know, we didn't have a label for it. And I think as we all think about all of the changes that are going on right now, some people are getting pretty worked up about their job title and how is this, the roles are blending and merging. I would say, don't worry about it. We haven't invented the title that you might have in 2 or 3 years. And it's okay. Focus on the learning. Focus on what you can be uh, advancing right now. And so I started this job at the Microsoft library and, you know, had this job called webmaster. I was one of Microsoft's first webmasters. And it was such an exciting time because this was the early days of the internet. And we did stupid things because there were no rules. I keep saying like it was the Wild West. That is completely what it is. This is an example of a very popular web page at the time, GeoCities, where somebody had the brilliant idea that we're going to organize the internet into different uh, locations, and you go in there and you go into the commercial district to buy things. But this was the early days, and we thought, oh, maybe it makes sense. Like we'll celebrate how many people actually come to the page, and hey, we can actually we can have MIDI files playing music when you come to the site. This should be an immersive experience. And if the site's not ready to build yet, well, we're going to put an animation of, it's under construction. Like this was the norm. You saw this everywhere. And then, this is one of my favorites. We're like, there's no pattern for good navigation systems. Like, let's explore this rotating animated audio experience. Like, it was crazy. And we were making mistakes left and right. But what was happening was that the patterns were starting to emerge underneath it. And so I guess the other learning that I think is really relevant for this time is it's okay right now to be moving fast and breaking things. But the point is to be finding the edges of this new material, exploring and playing with the new technology so that we understand what it's great at and what it's not. And I think it's so analogous to what we were doing back then. So fast forward a little bit, and like I said, I had this title called Webmaster. And in the times of like rapid exploration, there was like a need for people that could code and could do design and photography and music and you name it. I was expected to do it all. But as things started to settle down a little bit, I was being asked, look, this webmaster role no longer exists. You need to decide whether you're going to be an engineer or you're going to be a designer. And thank God I picked design because I would have been a terrible engineer. And what that reminds me is that in times of boom and exploration, what's really valued are a large set of skill sets, things that can go across, yeah, you can code a little bit, you can understand AI systems, and you understand users and how to get feedback from users. That is really what is in a lot of need right now. But as things start to settle down, the depth starts to really be important. And not to say that the AI bubble will burst, but it will certainly come down to a place where it's a little bit more understood and a little bit calmer. So we're now in the early 2000s, and we had what was called the dot-com crash. And, before this time, companies were hiring like armies of web designers on a bunch of hype, right? Like every person needs their own personal website. Every business needs a website. That was the kind of mantra of the day. But once the dot-com crashed, only the work that really made business value actually survived. And what was really interesting, and people forget about this, was that before and after the dot-com bubble burst, it was after that really led to the rise of user research in a more invested way, because companies wanted to demand more evidence for these investments that they were making. And so I think the learning from there is that what we saw, there was the question changed from during the hype bubble of, yes, can we build it, to should we build it, and what value are we actually going to be providing to our customers. And that really was the shift that I saw back in those days. And so you've got this, you've got a dot-com, the economy is falling apart. We have 9/11 hitting, subsequent wars that are going on. This was a really intense and scary time, which also reminds me a lot of what we're all experiencing as well. And as I reflect back around how we got through it, we really leaned on each other. There were leaders that were hinting at the way, but if we were really being honest with ourselves, it was that we were learning for each other. We really leaned in. And this is what I love about what Iggy and Alfie are doing, and the time that you're spending to spend with your community, because the way that we got through it back then wasn't through, these leaders saying, here's how it's gonna be. It was really about learning from each other. And so that is why I am just so thrilled to be speaking with you today, because, the road ahead, it's foggy. There's a lot of current, but what I'm seeing is a lot of patterns that I've learned from my experience. And the thing is, it's just happening much faster. It feels like we're not very, that we can't see very far down the road. But in fact, I think we were seeing a lot of the same height. It just happens to be a new decade. And there's a lot of talk being had around what AI can do by people that I don't know if I actually trust that much. And what I think is really important is that we can have conversations to kind of sift through that fog. And so really that brings me back to the kind of core talk that I was hoping to give today, to really understand how AI is impacting our field and your role in that. So what is happening is that acceleration is outpacing confidence. So user testing, we not only provide services, but we actually do our own research as well. And we did a study that we found that speed is outpacing certainty and output is outpacing defensibility. So what does that mean? Well, when we asked designers, they said that over 90% of them were report that they're working much faster with AI. And that's no surprise, and that's awesome, and that's expected. But what was interesting was that only 15% said that they felt highly confident in the quality of the work. And in fact, 20% said that the work is actually worse, despite all those speed gains. And so, what I see in this is a massive amplification of risk. Because what I see what's going on is that teams now can generate concepts, they can synthesize data so fast. And that is incredibly exciting. But you need to remember that in the old days, we still had this relatively slow speed of solution development to throttle the pace to market. So we could afford to spend the time and the energy to ensure that what we were delivering was of high quality, that it met user need and expectation. But now the dams have kind of broke, and we're drowning in infinite volume of ideas, of plausibility, because now that bottleneck of engineering, it's been removed. And so what it feels like, certainly as somebody who's a product leader, but I'm sure you're all feeling it as well, is that we're driving this car at 100 miles an hour down a multi-lane highway. And there's exits, and it's foggy, and there's traffic. And every inclination within us is saying, gosh, we just need to hit the brakes. But the reality is that we actually don't have that option, because you've got this executive pressure to deliver, maximize your outputs. You've got competitive threats in business that are with massive claims about what they're doing, and some of it is actually legitimate. And so what this begs the question is, well, what is our role in design, in research right now? And I'd argue that what we need is people to help to navigate, to help us know where it's actually okay to speed up, maybe even hit the accelerator harder, or where there's a risk ahead, where a curve is approaching. More eyes and ears that can be trusted to make sure that we're staying on course. And I know that I'm asking you to lean in and help in a time when you're feeling vulnerable. The maybe some of the practices that you've built your entire career on, whether it's in design or research, the timelines are being compressed. The bar for rigor isn't super clear anymore. What is truth? What does quality look like? Like, decisions are being made faster than you can validate them. So I really empathize. My team is in that same experience. But I think that there is a path ahead. And before we get into, well, what can you do about this? I just really want to talk through the lay of the land from a business perspective, because I think that there's a lot of BS that's being put out there right now. Business leaders are being sold the story of fast, effortless product development, and many believe it, because the thing is that AI makes the outputs look so convincing. They're so polished. The problem is that those outputs can create false confidence. And so what we're seeing is that leaders are starting to make big decisions based on assumptions of what AI is actually capable of. And so it's really important to look beyond those facades. And so I want to talk about some of the big mistakes that I'm seeing right now. And the first one is that this fallacy that AI can be a substitute for real users. Now, I'll caveat this. AI can enable faster interpretation. It can reduce the effort to get maybe some directional signals, but it is absolutely a dangerous replacement for human evidence. And just to illustrate this point, I don't know if you've heard of Caitlin Sullivan. She's this amazing researcher. So she did this great experiment. She gave AI a bunch of real transcripts from conversations that she had with real people. And she gave it to the AI, and then she asked it a bunch of new questions. And what she's found was that for simple, low risk questions, the AI was about 70% accurate. So, not terrible, maybe could make some directional choices on. But for the hard question, things that really would matter for the business, like likelihood to adopt or how much people would pay, the accuracy dropped to 20%. And what was really interesting, apart from that steep cliff, was that the errors they weren't random. What was happening was that the AI was consistently making the products look more appealing and more likely to succeed than they really are. And this happens because AI is designed to give answers that sound convincing and agreeable, not necessarily answers that are true. And just to take this one step further, my colleague, I worked with him at DirecTV. He tested this with this ridiculous idea. So he invented this product called the Spud gun. And basically, it's a gun and it shoots mashed potatoes in your mouth. And he asked AI around what it thought of the idea. And the AI did not question it at all. In fact, it supported it. It even suggested that this could be the biggest invention of food delivery systems that we've ever seen. So it's a ridiculous story, but it illustrates the point that you can't validate important decisions with a system that's designed to agree with you. And again, while AI can summarize inputs or give you some directional signals, you can't be validating important decision with this system that's designed to agree with you. Okay, that's the big one. AI does not equal real users. Here is another phrase that I'm hearing very consistently, mostly behind closed doors with other executives. And this is that 80% that the AI can do is good enough because the rework is cheap. So executives are starting to assume that even if AI is wrong a quarter of the time, it's fine because fixing the mistake is cheap. But what's happening is that they're confusing the cost of production with the cost of consequence. And to illustrate this point, the Baymert Institute, you guys might know them, they do great heuristic evaluations. They tested AI to see how it would do with these evaluations, and they found that it was about 50 and 75% accurate. So what that means is that if you have AI do a heuristic evaluation, maybe 5 of its recommendations are helpful, but 3 to 5 could actually hurt your result. And in one real example, an AI suggested replacing product image thumbnails with these little small dots. And I'd argue, okay, it sounds reasonable. Maybe you're driving focus, more primary. We've seen the dots before. It's a pattern. But when implemented by a major U.S. retailer, this drove a 1% drop in revenue, which 1% might not seem much, but when you're a major retailer, that's millions and millions of dollars. And the problem is, it's not that AI is consistently wrong all the time. I mean, that would be easy. It's that it's confidently wrong enough to really matter. And when it is wrong, it's so convincing. It looks and it sounds like so something that you can believe in. And so this really starts to touch on what is our new role, where even if our business is going to accept this 80% is good, being good enough, it then becomes our jobs to catch that 20%, because we need to be the filter for the harmful hallucinations, the gaps in logic before they ship and actually provide real harm to our customers. And then last, the other fallacy that I'm seeing is this terminology. It's called human in the loop, HITL. They even have an acronym for it. I believe this is not enough. And a lot of leaders are assuming that just if a designer or a human is looking at the outputs of AI that the risk is covered. But again, AI is creating the outputs look so polished, and that polish can really hide serious problems. And designers feel this. So this was again from the large survey that we did. And almost half the designers said that their biggest concern when it comes to AI is that the outputs sound right, but they're really hard to verify. And so we drilled into that with a follow-up question. And we said, well, if you're not validating your outputs with real users, what are you doing? And they said, well, we're relying on peer reviews. So I guess that's better than nothing. You're getting, 4 eyes instead of 2. But technically, that's human in the loop. And I'd argue that's not enough. I mean, reviewing something that looks right is not the same as knowing it's right. And particularly for me, who is an executive now that has to make business decisions, I can't rely just on human in the loop. I actually need evidence in the loop. I need sources. I need citations. I need real user feedback. I feel like I need something real that I can reach out and touch. And frankly, AI proxies aren't going to cut it. Because again, those outputs that look and feel and present like their research, but if it's not grounded in real human evidence, it's effectively research theater. And I want to pause because I know it sounds like I might be making a case against AI, and I am not. Like, the opportunity here is really real. We can generate fully accessible pattern-based experiences in hours. I mean, that's work that used to take days. We can go through waking up in the morning with an idea to something that customers can react to in a prototype in the afternoon and have real feedback and iterate later that afternoon. This is unprecedented. So I am not saying that we need to abandon or shirk away AI. I'm just suggesting that we govern it. And the way that we do that is by using it responsibly. So one of the ways that you can think about this, and this is what my team uses, is this simple framework called the risk gradient model. And at its core, what this is really about is matching the speed of our tools, this new capability, to the stakes of the decision. And so over here on the left, this is the green zone. These are low risk, reversible decisions. And this is where AI acceleration has a really awesome advantage. So it can be generating options. It can be summarizing your desk research. We can apply it to however it's going to make you faster. But as you move to the right, see, the stakes are starting to change. And so decisions become harder to reverse, and the consequences can really start to impound. So over on the far right, these are the high risk critical decisions. And this is where human oversight is a non-negotiable. This is where careful judgment, interpretation, real human evidence is going to matter the most. But, the obvious thing is, like, the big mistake is like to apply green zone speed to these red zone areas. But actually the reverse is just as true. If you attempt to apply that same red zone rigor to green zone work, this is actually, you're slowing down where speed is actually the advantage. And so what I'm asking is to start understanding where you're optimizing your expertise for where it's going to have the most impact. I tell my team, don't compete where AI is strong. If AI can take a bunch of data and synthesize it in minutes, and it would have taken you multiple days, that's your value is no longer in that type of output. And so I would rather be looking for where your value is really showing up. If AI is looking through a bunch of findings, for you to know which one is actually true for your users, not just plausible, digging through and really applying that level of scrutiny to these findings. If AI is taking three signals that seem to contradict each other, how do you make sense of that and convince a room around which one we need to trust and why? And then it's about noticing the questions that aren't being asked anymore before the team starts building this perfect thing that was the wrong thing to build in the first place. So what I would say is that this is more important than ever because there's some trends and predictions that I have. First, we're about to see this sea of sameness because what's happening is that AI is trained on patterns. So it's naturally going to produce what's already exists. And if everybody is using the same models, everything is going to start looking the same. But here's what happens next. Brands aren't going to be okay with that. So they're going to want to push to stand out. They're going to experiment more. They're going to be taking bigger swings, which as a designer, I'm all for. That's really exciting. But that also introduces more risk because not all those ideas are going to work out. And that's where you come in, where you need to help us, your businesses, understand what is actually going to work, what doesn't, and why. The other reason why you are so important right now is that the way that the products themselves are fundamentally changing. For decades, I built this career around designing these fixed interfaces, whether it be on the Xbox or Ticketmaster or whatever, screens and flows and interactions. But the problem is that the new experiences of the future are going to be dynamic. They're going to be fully conversational. They're going to be what we call non-deterministic. They change based on what users say, what they need, what context they're in. The interface itself might be completely dynamically generated based on special context, which means there's no single user journey. So how do you test something that changes every time? How are you going to know? How are you going to evaluate it and know what's good and what's not? And at user testing, we're spending a lot of time thinking about this, and we've got some early thoughts and some directions, but we don't have this figured out now, right? So that's your role in being part of this decade and this special time is leaning in and really understanding this. And the last point that why I think this is so important is because this has always been true, but it just is more important now, is that humans are changing faster than AI can keep up. AI learns from the past, but people, they're changing in real time, even in our own field. Last year, I went out to researchers and I asked them, what would you think if we took your studies and the transcripts that you get back and we automatically summarize them with AI and give you kind of the top themes and learnings? And they said, hell no. We have no interest in that whatsoever. Okay. But I went back 3 months later and I asked the same people the same question. And they said, of course we expect that. That is table stakes. What a stupid question. Of course. If in 90 days, people in our own industry can change that fast, I mean, AI can only tell you what people wanted before, but if I'm making business decisions, design decisions, I need to understand what's happening right now, which means that I still need humans talking to humans. AI can't tell you what's about to go wrong. That's still on us as researchers, as designers. We need to be spotting the thing that looks fine, but it probably isn't. And so we need to bring evidence of when to slow down and when it's fine to move quickly. And as practitioners, you need to be training yourself to see the hazards before we crash. And that really is a job now. It's not about more processes and screens and flows. It is about judgment, backed by proof, delivered fast enough so that we can actually inform decisions that are being made. So I think we need more humans, not less. We need judgment. We need designers who are trained to understand people, who've built the intuition to sense when something isn't right. And that doesn't come from just querying a model. It's going to be coming from doing the long work to know what wrong feels like. And absolutely learn the tools. This is an exciting time. You know, this is the Wild West. Get curious as hell about what they can do. But don't confuse learning the tool and the technology with having an answer, right? Like find the edges, learn their limits, and use them to get feedback faster, to build conviction faster, to sell your conviction faster. Because the tools were never the value. Even back in my day, it was always about judgment. And that's why companies need you now more than ever. You know, AI gives us the speed, but it's going to be you guys that provide that direction. And so, yeah, thank you for having me so much. Before we open it up for Q&A, I do just want to mention, as I mentioned, I'm from user testing. We provide a service where it's called a QX score, where either for your products or your company's products, you can get a sense of how it's actually doing. And this is a pretty cool thing. Sometimes people do it on their competitors and kind of do a compete against each other. If you're interested, we're giving away, this is working with our professional services team. They'll go run the test, you get the results. You can scan the QR, enter your information, and then we'll loop back with you. So anyways, with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I hope I didn't blab too much and that we still have some time for some questions. And I apologize for sweating. I'm in Spain and it's warm.
Jason, thank you so much for an amazing, insightful talk. Personally appreciated the pieces where you were saying, you were kind of going through the timeline, but what really stood out for me was the piece where you said, we need your help. That's gold. I value organizations that ask for help, you know, that say, we need you to help us move forward. And if we move forward, we can collectively move forward. I also like the fact that you were just dropping bombs, knowledge bombs all over the place, and you were just dropping these little quotes. You know, that was amazing. I just want to read some of the questions. Some of the people were saying that this is gold. Some people were responding in relation to what you were saying, but there's a few questions that I'd like to read out to you. So we've actually got 3 or 4. The first one is from Christopher. So he's got 2 questions. The one question is, so he says, I was part of a new pilot program to teach these skills at uni in 2024-25. Anyone who went to the same uni will recognize that this is either BSc InfoScience or BA ILKM. First time the uni taught it in that way. It's nice to hear that I'm using my degree. Could we look at our current timing as a new industrial revolution? And in the same way life was designed and needed to be rethought, we could do the same now. So that's the first question.
That's a nice softball. Sorry. Can you, I didn't understand, just back up a little bit. There was something, could this be considered a new way of what?
Could we look at our current timing as a new industrial revolution? In the same way life was designed and needed to be rethought, we could do the same now. So I'll paste that question in the chat as a last comment, if you'd like to read it out as well.
One, this is, did you say it was Christopher? What I love about this is that when we are in these times of dramatic change, it prompts really big questions. And it sounds like a lot of your audience are really stepping back and looking at the broader implications. And I would say this is the time to be asking those questions 100%. That's where I spend a lot of my time, is trying to think through like, oh, okay, if this is happening, what does this become? And are there bigger questions that we're not actually surfacing? And that's a mind of a researcher, right? Like they're thinking about broader things. So I don't know. I don't have any perspective on what they're thinking here. But what I do is I love the thinking of, wait a minute, if we're seeing this, and to be honest, like there's so many moving pieces here with the workforce retraining, with the implications to the economy, to what value humans are providing. Those are big conversations. But what I will say is that people that are designers, researchers, front end engineers, people who are passionate about understanding people, they need to be part of those conversations. Because if not, it's a bunch of fucking tech bros that are having these conversations. And excuse my French, I get worked up about this. And so what I would say is that this is the time for designers, for people who want to make a positive impact, for researchers who are so passionate about understanding human beings, what makes them tick, and they want truth. That's what drives the researchers, want truth. This is the time to really be leaning in this, because there's a lot of big discussions happening. There's a lot of big decisions being made. And to be overwhelmed by what's going on right now and decide, you know what, I'm just going to play this out. We'll see where it all lands. That's my big fear for UXers. This is the time to really be leaning in and get involved in those conversations. Ask those bigger questions to think, well, where is this all going through? Or should we be thinking completely different? Is there an opportunity here? And those are the types of questions that we need to be leaning into.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next question, and I'll paste it again in the chat. And this question, speaking about front-end engineers, is from Skulk. He's a huge front-end engineer in the community. And his question reads, how imperative would you say it is for designers to dig under the surface of AI and fundamentally cultivate a technical understanding of how it actually works, what it does, and what is good or not good at? Do you find there is a resistance amongst designers to delve down to that technical level?
Yep. So there's two questions there. 100%. When I talk about understanding the new material, Scott, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You have to go deep enough to really understand where it can fall apart, to understand what it's good at and where those boundaries are. Oh, wait, I'm starting to see this fall off here. Or this is the context where I'm starting to see more hallucinations. Or, hey, I'm seeing these kind of outputs that seem biased. Why is that? Well, you need to understand how the technology kind of works. I think that everybody in this new world needs to go deeper to a certain level. But I also think that there's different types of designers. There's different types of front-end people that will be naturally oriented to go even deeper. And that is those types of designers, my guess is there will be new roles called something, I'm not even going to invent the title, for the designers that are highly, highly technically savvy and really get to that fundamental. There will be others that actually, maybe they lean more into some of the different aspects of, maybe it's the research side, really. They're like, we're seeing this blending of roles. Some of them will go deeper into technology. I think everybody needs to come down and have a fundamental understanding of how this works, where bias can creep in, what it's good for, what's not, where the current edges are, how those edges are going to change over time as the models keep updating. That there's a foundational layer that everybody needs to know. And I think there's a subset of people that will go really deep. And those will be some of the new roles that we see in the future. And then do I see resistance among designers? Sure, of course, it's new, it's scary. Some people aren't technically minded. This is why I do like people that can explain things in a way for people that don't have a deep technical background. I'm really fortunate we have our chief science officer. She's also a teacher. She's at a university. And so she sits down with my design team and she talks through, okay, here's what an embedding is, and here's what machine language or machine learning, what this means. But all this is available on YouTube now. And I do think it's important for folks to just spend the time, find somebody who talks in a way that can make it meaningful to use, using metaphors that you might know from design or just from life. It's out there, but I do think it's critical that you understand this new material. This is our new design. just like web pages and internet was like, what is this thing and how does it work? This is our new material. And so we have to understand it deep enough so that we can mold it and use it to its maximum potential.
Thank you, Jason. We've got another question from Christopher Stevens, pasted in the chat. I'd like to establish a learning facility that restarts the Bauhaus central thesis as a way to organize our practice, bring in others, architecture, industrial, digital product, and convert design from a qualitative aspect, as it's seen, to a more compliance issue needed to launch. This could drive design as a preliminary design requirement rather than pure execution. It could also buy us time in the process. What advice would you give to anyone trying to organize how we lean into each other?
Two things. One, I love it. Where I would lean into initially for these types of efforts is leaning into already existing legislation or conversations that are being having right now to see where design can be integrated into that. Top of mind for me is some of the either AI usage or accessibility legislation that's getting done now. But I really love this. I mean, it's kind of going back to the Industrial Revolution conversation. Like, how do we, is there a broader opportunity to rethink the role of design and the problem that it has traditionally had, particularly UX design over the past 20 years, which is people still don't understand it, and we've never done a really great job of articulating the ROI for investing in this field. So I really love this approach. I think that there is some promise there. Advice for anyone trying to organize how we lean into each other. Well, this is a good start, but this is the place, like this is the forum to get introduced, see some names. The next thing is the follow-up. So having conversations, and it's direct conversations. So, let's say you and I connect, then I happen to know 3 people who are in the education space or whatever. I think that's how things tend to happen, is the connection between people who can actually start making decisions or get actively involved. And so, and I'm old school, like maybe there's new modern ways like people connect, but just actually getting on a call and having a conversation, I think it's underrated. And so, and feel free, like I'm on LinkedIn, reach out and talk more. But I think that's where the most impact can have at this time, especially because with all this AI and we're on this digital overload, reading these documents and reading all these AI outputs, people want just to like hop on a call and connect people to people and have a conversation and think about like, wow, that's a really new, interesting thought. Like talk out loud. So that would be a recommendation.
Thank you for that very honest, practical recommendation. I cannot agree more. How underrated conversations have become. I mean, yeah.
I mean, think Alfie, you, myself, and Iggy, like we hopped on a call and literally later that day I introduced you guys to somebody else who happened to be in South Africa. I mean, this is the way that these kind of, I don't call it grassroots, but this is the way that connections get made.
Jason, we've got a few more questions. I hope you're still good for time. The next question. So we've got 2 similar questions, and I'm going to ask both of them. I'm going to ask them both from 2 different individuals. So the one is from Lesefo. How does one market themselves for the role they are doing that does not align with their title and towards where they want to go? Now, that's the one question. And a somewhat similar question from Silla. Any advice for juniors trying to get in the field while companies are focusing on AI? So they're both speaking about growth, and I thought I'd ask both of them together.
Yeah, it's tough. I'm trying to go back to like my history and understand how we made a case for investing in this thing that became UX, which wasn't invented yet. I think one of the key things that we didn't talk about job titles. We didn't talk about, well, we did talk about like wanting to get a seat at the table. That was the big thing when I was, starting out, was like, you were, as a designer, you were never even invited to the meetings. Like, so that was the big rallying cry. We need a seat at the table. The mantras don't work. What you want to do is sell the value that you're providing and consistently. And so if you're doing something that is like, let's say it is providing your leaders or your team with more confidence in making decisions, play that up, right? Like always think about what is the value that you're providing that the business cares about. That's the only way that you make influence an organization to do anything. If you have a vision, this is the other thing I guess I'll say. The beauty about being a designer is you've got all these tools at your disposal, and they can be applied against any problem. So really clarify what is the problem first. Right? That's what we learn in design thinking. So what is the problem that I'm actually trying to articulate? Is it that I want this organization to value me more, or the roles that I have? Like get really clear about what that is. Then do your research. Okay, what are the barriers to that? What are the frictions for me to do that? Oh, maybe it's do some research, some internal exploration around, hey, what are some of the big problems that you're seeing? Understand your users. Your users are your stakeholders. So what is keeping you awake at night? Help me understand that so that then I can really contextualize what I see for the future versus what you actually care about. The other thing is we're great storytellers. So, and we imagine things. We imagine the future and we can bring them to life. We draw pictures or we tell stories. So that might be another way of like, imagine a world where we had this role where people provided more confidence with the decisions that we're making. Whatever your vision of that is, tell a story and kind of share that. So then it gets people excited for what that could be, and ask questions. Like the best influence techniques I have are ask the questions that I already kind of have an idea what the answer is. Oh, in this new world, how are we going to know? How are we going to know if these AI experiences are any good? I don't know. That's probably going to be important. Let them think about that. Oh, how are we going to understand whether the investment that we're making in these capabilities of chatbots or whatever are any good? Like, use those kind of mechanics to get the organization to be asking the questions that you want them to be asking, and then lo and behold, you're like, oh well, I don't know. What do you think? Well, I think we could do this, this, and this. So those are some pieces of advice. This is about, if you're in a company and how to move it in a direction where you think there's an opportunity for you personally. For junior folks right now, I kind of touched on this, and this was like, this is your time where you're the electronic musician and there's this new capability. Start playing for it. Listen really carefully around for what grabs you, what excites you about this new capability, and really lean into that and be willing to go deep into it. Maybe it is the technical side of it. You're like, oh, I didn't realize I was so enamored with understanding how this thing works. Then let yourself go deep. I would say let your curiosity guide you right now, because what's going to happen is you're going to learn. You're going to learn so much quicker than in those areas than forcing yourself to do something that doesn't come naturally. And then what is going to happen is that there will be more clarity around what actual skills are going to be needed. And if you happen to be going deep into an area that companies are wanting, that is going to be a great match. I think, what else would I say? Yeah, follow new curiosity. I mean, it's hard. I'm biased. That worked for me. And so I know it's a tough time. It's a really confusing place to be getting your foot in the door. I will say there are some encouraging statistics. I know the headlines tend to be really depressing around, oh, no, only people are hiring senior folks. The data actually isn't showing that's true. There's a lot of companies that recognize that we need the next generation of talent, and these AI natives are going to be really, really important to our future. And so also don't let the big headlines freak you out too much, because the companies are hiring entry-level jobs. It's just we don't hear a ton of it.
Thank you. We've got I think we've got one more question, and this is from Tyra. I think she's in Nairobi. If AI has many people building solutions for themselves, does this mean that people are increasingly unwilling to purchase software or pay for the tools? What does this mean for product designers if people start creating their own solutions using AI agents? Is the definition of what a product is changing as far as a product teams are concerned?
Yeah, I mean, again, multi-part question. Yeah, lots of people are building their own things. Oh, that's nice, Alfie. Now I can read it. I think in some cases, like why pay for something when you can just build it yourself? It was the same thing when I when I was growing up. Like, why would I pay a web designer if I can just like look at the source code? The reality is there's more to software than just building something that works. Maybe in some special purpose instances, you can build a little agent that'll do something and stuff, but software is more than that. Like there's maintenance, there's uptime, there's stability, there's, troubleshooting it when there's an update in the middle of the night. So I don't know. I think I'm not sure I see a ton of that. I do 100% think that there's going to be new types of software that you actually go into an interface and you're like, here's the problem I'm trying to solve. And it automatically generates an interface for you. And you're like, okay, well, I'm planning a trip. So now I'm doing this kind of thing. And then once it's done, you throw it away. So I think there is going to be new types of products, if you will, but I think the interaction model will be very different. But who's going to design how those products get built? Well, it's designers. So that's where in some ways design is shifting left, further up around how do we design the systems that then build the software and interfaces and things like that, and how do we get people to trust it, or give information? Like there's a ton of really hard questions that we haven't figured out yet. I love some of the frontier labs and Microsoft and other folks. They've got like principles about how AI products should be designed. And we're learning as we're making mistakes and we're refining it. But like none of that's figured out right now. And so I think that's the space. I think we're going to start seeing more software, not less. I mean, one stat I'll just cite is look at the App Store, the number of apps over the past year. It's gone exponential. Like there's so many more apps in the marketplace right now because it's so easy. Anybody can build an app and they just push it up to the store, and that's awesome. But look at the use. The use hasn't changed almost at all. And so there's going to be lots of experimentation. There's going to be a lot of slop put out there. And I think we're going to go through that. Oh, okay, yes, I could do it, but should I? And is it worth the value versus me just paying $15 a month for this subscription and they take care of all the stuff that I actually don't really want to do? We'll see.
Thank you for that, Jason. I just want to add something there to what you said about the app stores. I think it's also a case of a lot of companies ask, how can what we provide our customers or our users generate value for them? But I think when you're building an app, it's that same question that you need to ask, not only through the product or the service. So I think we was building apps just for and pushing it. It's actually how is this going to create value in those individuals' lives. Right now, time has become a commodity, and people, they don't only want quality, they want time as much as they're consuming it. So I think value, people need to remember value in how I'm going to receive it and how I'm going to give it as well. We don't have any more questions, but we have lots of comments. I just want to drop your LinkedIn link in the chat as well. If there aren't any more questions, I'd like to say, Jason, thank you to you. Thank you to the user testing team. I also just want to kind of mention that the user testing team, they're keen to get involved with the South African audience, with the African audience. We've got people here from Kenya. We've got people from Dubai. We've got people from other parts of South Africa. They really want to get involved with our community, and they're keen to understand what the challenges are that we have, the problems that we're facing, and how can they help to resolve that. So if you do have any questions for Jason beyond this insightful talk, connect with him via LinkedIn. Yeah, reach out, ask your questions, do a coffee connect. He's an awesome guy. Awesome guy. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you for having me. It was a real pleasure, and I'll give you a version of the deck, Alfie and Iggy, if you want to distribute it. That's awesome too, just so everybody has a takeaway. But thank you very much. It is super awesome to get these invites, and I 100%. Yes, please reach out. Let's connect.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. I hope you have a great rest of your